This is the story of a family that lent gold to kings and grew richer every single time Europe went to war. The Rothschilds, the most powerful banking dynasty in history. Before the gold changes hands, follow this channel. Because the story of how power really moves is one you'll want to see all the way to the end. At their height, their combined fortune dwarfs any bank on the continent. Not a single throne is safe from their reach. And no monarch declares war without quietly wondering the same cold question. Will the family fund it, or won't they? Kings command armies. The Rothschilds command the money that armies run on. And that, in the end, is the greater weapon. Hard cut. It is the 1760s, in the cramped Jewish ghetto of Frankfurt. A narrow street, hemmed in by high walls, where the gates are locked from the outside every night. The people inside are counted, taxed, and confined. And in this locked street lives a coin dealer named Mayer Amschel Rothschild. He is a small man doing small business, rare coins, old medals, bills of exchange, which is really just a fancy word for a paper promise to pay, the 18th century version of a check that could travel between cities. He sits at a wooden table, sorting gold pieces by candlelight, patient, careful, methodical, and different. While other traders chase the quick sale, Mayer studies the men who buy. He learns one lesson early, and it never leaves him. The men who hold the money hold everything. So he goes hunting for the biggest holder of money he can find. And he finds him. Crown Prince Wilhelm of Hesse, one of the richest princes in all of Europe. A man who made his fortune in a chilling trade, renting out his own soldiers to foreign kings, cash in advance, blood paid later. Wilhelm is drowning in gold and needs men he can trust to move it, hide it, and grow it. Mayer begins with the small jobs. A rare coin for the prince's collection. A discount here, a favor there. He never pushes, he never boasts. He is useful, quiet, and always exactly on time. Slowly, the coin dealer from the locked street becomes the prince's financial servant. He handles the loans. He handles the secrets. And that single relationship, one careful man, one very rich prince, is the seed of an empire. Because Mayer understands something the prince does not. Serving the money is how you learn to command it. Now comes the decision that turns a family business into a dynasty. Mayer has 5 sons. And he does something radical, something no rival thinks to do. He does not keep them home to guard the family shop. He scatters them across the map of Europe like pieces on a board. Nathan to London, James to Paris, Salomon to Vienna, Karl to Naples, and Amschel, the eldest, stays behind in Frankfurt. 5 brothers, 5 capitals, 1 family. And here is the part that changes everything. These 5 houses do not operate alone. They are bound together by a constant stream of secret letters, written in the family's own private code, carried between the cities by their own private couriers. Fast horses, trusted riders, sealed pouches that no customs officer dares open. Think of it as the first private internet. A network that moves news across borders faster than any king, any government, any rival on the continent. And ask yourself, what is worth more than an army? The family already knew the answer. Not the gold in the vault, the knowing. The fact that a letter in London could reach Frankfurt before the official post, before the ambassadors, before the ministers. When you know first, everyone else is trading on yesterday. And that advantage, that was never luck. That was a pattern. A deliberate machine of leverage and information, built on purpose, repeated across generations. Which raises a question that hangs over this entire story. Why do the same families stay powerful across centuries, while the fortunes around them rise and vanish? The honest answer is that great wealth almost never comes from one lucky break. It comes from a handful of recurring patterns, used again and again, that most people never even see. That's exactly what a short read called The Empire Code lays out. It breaks down the 6 patterns beneath nearly every great fortune: leverage, positioning, capital, and compounding advantage, in plain language, so you can spot the same blueprint at work in every dynasty you admire. This one included. No fluff, just the mechanics. If this story is pulling you in, scan the code on screen or check the link in the description. Because the Rothschilds are about to prove that blueprint on the biggest stage history has ever offered. For now, the network moves quietly. It carries prices, contracts, warnings, rumors. Useful, but gentle. A tool of trade. And then Europe catches fire. Napoleon marches across the continent, toppling kingdoms, redrawing borders, dragging every nation into the largest war the world has yet seen. And suddenly, that web of couriers stops being a tool of trade. It becomes a weapon. In London, the fiercest of the 5 brothers, Nathan Rothschild, is smuggling gold across a war-torn continent to fund the British armies fighting Napoleon. And soon, those private riders will carry one single piece of news across the channel: the outcome of a battle called Waterloo, that not one government on earth has yet heard. Waterloo, June 1815. The cannons still smoke on the field, and legend says Nathan Rothschild learns the outcome a full day before the British government does, carried to him by his own couriers across the channel. A lone rider crosses the coast at dawn with a sealed dispatch. The Empire of Europe has just changed hands, and one man in London already knows it. The story goes that Nathan walks onto the floor of the exchange and starts selling. His agents follow. Panic spreads. If Nathan is selling, Britain must have lost. So everyone sells, prices collapse, and then, at the bottom, Nathan quietly buys everything for pennies. When the real news arrives, he is unimaginably richer. Maybe it happened that way. Maybe it didn't. Historians still argue over the details. But here is the darker, simpler truth beneath the legend, and it matters far more than the theatrics on the trading floor. The Rothschilds do not need a trick. They already have the one advantage no rival can buy. They know first. The private couriers, the secret letters in code, the network stretched across 5 cities, all of it exists for a single purpose: to carry the truth to the family before the world hears a word. Information moving faster than any government. Information worth more than any army. And now, the machine underneath it comes fully into view. Because the real fortune is never built on a single lucky day. Watch closely, because this is the exact move most people never see. The money doesn't bet on the war. It bets on the debt. Think about what a war actually does to a king. It empties his treasury. He needs gold now, immediately, to pay soldiers, to buy powder, to keep his throne. So he borrows. And the Rothschilds are the men who lend. They lend to governments drowning in war debt. And they do it in a way no one has ever done before. When a government needs to raise millions, the family issues the loan as bonds, printed slips of paper that promise to pay the holder back, with interest, over years. And they issue those bonds across all 5 banking houses at once: London, Paris, Vienna, Frankfurt, Naples, selling the same debt to investors in 5 capitals on the same morning. No single banker in Europe can move money on that scale. The Rothschilds can. And every time a bond passes through their hands, they take a cut of the flow, a small slice of an entire continent's money. They are not gambling on who wins the war. They are financing both the fear and the recovery, and taking their fee either way. Here is the terrible beauty of it. When nations bleed, they profit. And when peace finally comes, they profit again. Because a Europe wrecked by war has to be rebuilt, and rebuilding costs money too. So the same family that funded the armies now funds the railways that stitch the broken countries back together, the mines that feed the new factories, the great engines of the industrial age. A 19th century railway rises across a valley, laborers driving iron into the earth, and somewhere behind it is a Rothschild bond. War or peace, ruin or recovery, the flow never stops, and the family sits at the center of it, taking their slice of everything that moves. By the middle of the 1800s, the scale becomes almost impossible to grasp. The Rothschilds are financing the Bank of England itself, lending gold to the very institution that stands behind Britain's currency. When a government runs short, they bail it out. When a nation wants to build, the family quietly decides which projects live and which die. A canal, a railway, a national loan, all of it waits on a nod from a family that answers to no parliament and no crown. Their name stops being a name. It becomes a synonym for money. To say someone is as rich as a Rothschild is simply how Europe now describes wealth beyond counting. And this is where the story turns cold. Because power on this scale does something to the people watching it. It breeds fear. And fear, given enough time, curdles into hatred. The very thing that built the family, the silence, the secrecy, the private letters no outsider ever reads, now becomes their curse. If no one can see how the money moves, people invent the answer for themselves. And the answer they invent is a monster. Whispers spread through the cafes and the newspapers. A hidden hand behind every throne. A single family, Jewish, secretive, immensely rich, pulling the strings of kings and pushing nations into war for profit. Broadsheets appear across the continent, ugly caricatures of a spider crouched over the map of Europe, one clawed hand reaching for every capital. Here is the question that follows every great fortune. Is it a hidden hand, or simply the family that always knew first? The truth, of course, is the second one. The Rothschilds do not start the wars. They lend to the men who do. But try telling that to a frightened public looking for someone to blame. It is easier to hate a shadow than to understand a system. And so the family is accused of the one thing they never did, of causing the very wars they merely financed. This is the price of the name. The gold made them powerful. The silence made them untouchable. But the silence also made them a target, an empty space that every fear in Europe rushes to fill. And now that suspicion is no longer a whisper in a Vienna coffeehouse. It is spreading, hardening, gathering across an entire continent. The shadow the family cannot outrun is about to become a storm. Revolutions are coming. And beyond them, 2 world wars, reaching straight for the houses in Vienna and Frankfurt, where a new force is already stirring, one that will seize everything and scatter the family to the winds, the Nazis. And now the storm arrives. It is the year 1938. In Vienna, the doors of Salomon's great house are bolted from the outside. Confiscation notices are nailed across the wood. Guards carry seized ledgers into the street, and men in uniform empty vaults that took 100 years to fill. In Frankfurt, on the same narrow ground where Meyer Amschel once counted rare coins by candlelight, the branch that carried his name is crushed. The Vienna and Frankfurt branches, built by 2 of his 5 sons, are erased by the rise of the Nazis. Assets are seized. Family members are hunted, imprisoned, forced to buy their own freedom and flee. Old portraits and older letters, the private couriers, the secret network, the first private internet, are packed into crates and scattered across the world. This is the darkest test in the family's history. Everything the shadow ever whispered has come true at once. For a century, they were blamed as the hidden hand behind every throne, the invisible power that pulled the strings of Europe. And here, in the cruelest irony, that very legend becomes the excuse to destroy them. The name that made them untouchable now paints a target on every door they own. And across the continent, the great families fall with them. Rival dynasties that once seemed just as mighty, just as ancient, vanish completely in the same storm. Their banks are absorbed. Their fortunes are stripped. Their names, once spoken with fear in every capital, are wiped from the ledgers and forgotten inside a single generation. Remember the question we opened with. How does a family win from every catastrophe? This is the answer, and it costs everything to learn. Because the Rothschilds do not vanish. They shrink. They adapt. They endure. The London house of Nathan survives. The Paris house of James survives. The family that spread itself across 5 cities 200 years ago discovers, in its darkest hour, exactly why that decision was genius. No single throne can seize all of them. No single army can burn every branch. Cut off one house, and the others still stand, still connected, still moving. Where a lesser dynasty was a single tower waiting to fall, the Rothschilds were 5 towers in 5 kingdoms. And when the fire came, some of them simply did not burn. They rebuild in silence, the way they have always done everything. And to this day, the name has not disappeared. They are still present in banking, in wine, and in finance. There is a modern Rothschild advisory firm sitting quietly at the table of billion-dollar mergers. And there is a Rothschild vineyard in Bordeaux, the label on a bottle of wine poured at the finest tables on earth. The same name, the same red shield, carried across 3 centuries of war, revolution, and ruin. That is the payoff of the whole story. The empires that tried to destroy them are gone. The kings they lent to are dust. The Nazi regime that seized their vaults was ash within 7 years. And the family they tried to erase is still here. So what was the real fortune? Because it was never only the gold. The gold could be seized. The gold was seized. The vaults were emptied. The ledgers carried away under guard. If gold had been the secret, the family would have died in 1938 with the rest of them. But the true fortune was something no soldier could carry out of a building. It was the discipline of silence, the iron habit of saying least when everyone else is shouting. It was patience measured not in years, but in generations, fathers training sons to think in centuries. And it was one cold rule, learned by a coin dealer in a locked ghetto and passed down through every crisis since. Information is worth more than any army. An army can be defeated. A border can be crossed. But the family who knows first, who hears of the victory at Waterloo a day before the government does, who reads the letter before the market wakes, that family is never truly at the mercy of events. They see the wave before it breaks. And knowing first is how fortunes are made and how they are kept. That is the machine of generational wealth laid bare. Crisis is not the enemy. Crisis is the stage. The war, the crash, the revolution. These are the moments when the men who panic sell everything to the man who does not. Information is the weapon. Discipline and silence are what let you survive long enough to use it. And the Rothschilds are the living proof, still standing on a battlefield where every rival has fallen. 5 brothers, 5 cities, 1 family, bound by secret letters carried through the night. They proved a single brutal truth about power. The family who knows first and says least is the one still standing when empires fall. Now, most of you came for the documentary, and I respect that completely. But if you want the deeper framework beneath this, the actual patterns these dynasties used again and again to turn every catastrophe into a payday, stay for this last thought, because it is the whole reason their story still matters. Go back to where we began. A single gold coin resting on a dark table under one narrow beam of light. 250 years ago, a careful man in a locked street picks it up and understands something the kings around him never will. That the coin is not the power. The knowing is the power. The silence around the knowing is the power. Everything else, the palaces, the bonds, the railways, the shield above the door, is only what the silence buys. The kings are gone. The empires are gone. The men who tried to erase the name are gone. And the name endures, quiet as ever, exactly as it planned to. Gold and silence. Vanish. And if this is the kind of story that pulls you in, the machinery under the money, the patterns that outlive centuries, then stay close. There is always another empire to take apart, another family that learned to be the last one standing. I will be here when you are ready for the next one.